I never expected my life to change the day I stepped through the gates of her mansion. To me, it was just another job, another wealthy woman's house to clean, another week of quiet work in the shadows. But nothing about her was ordinary. She carried herself like someone who ruled the world, her voice smooth, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding every room she walked into. And yet, when those same eyes lingered on me for a second too long, I felt something shift inside me. Something I couldn't ignore. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was the woman with everything, and I was the one hired to stay invisible. But in the silence of polished hallways and behind the closed doors of her mansion, sparks began to flicker, unspoken glances, soft touches disguised as accidents. The kind of tension that leaves your heart racing. What happens when two women from completely different worlds are drawn together by a force neither of them can resist? What if the walls of her mansion can't keep her secrets hidden forever? Before we begin this forbidden tale of desire, betrayal, and unexpected tenderness, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next, because this story will keep you holding your breath until the very last word. The first time I stepped into her mansion, I felt as though I had crossed into a different world. The air smelled faintly of roses and leather, and the polished marble floor reflected the soft light of crystal chandeliers. I told myself it was just another job, just another house. But my heart betrayed me, beating faster the moment I saw her. Her name was Victoria Hayes, a woman whose presence filled the room even before she spoke. She wasn't just wealthy. She embodied elegance in a way I had only ever seen in magazines. Her dark hair was swept into a loose bun, revealing a graceful neck and a face that was beautiful in a way that was almost intimidating. She looked at me when I introduced myself. "Elena," I said, trying not to sound nervous, and her eyes seemed to strip away every pretense. "You're new," she said simply, her voice low and measured, with the faintest trace of amusement. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. Her gaze lingered on me a second too long, and then she nodded. "Well, I expect discretion and thoroughness. My world is complicated." She left the words hanging in the air, as if daring me to ask more. I didn't. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice things. The mansion wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. Guests came and went, some leaving in expensive cars, others slipping quietly through side doors. Victoria often held late-night meetings in her study, her voice carrying through the halls, commanding yet private. I told myself to focus on my work, to keep my head down, but my curiosity betrayed me. One afternoon, I found myself polishing the silver tray in the kitchen when she walked in unexpectedly. I nearly dropped it. She wore a silk blouse, unbuttoned just enough to reveal a glimpse of her collarbone. She looked tired, but even exhaustion couldn't dim the power in her eyes. "You've been here long enough," she said, leaning against the counter, "to know that I value silence." I froze, unsure if she was reprimanding me. "Of course," I said quickly. "I don't speak of what I see." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good, because not everyone in my circle is trustworthy." There was a silence then, heavy and charged. She didn't move, and neither did I. I felt the pull of her presence like gravity, my chest tightening, my breath shallow. Finally, she broke the moment with a soft laugh and brushed past me, her hand grazing my arm ever so slightly. The touch was fleeting, almost accidental, but it left my skin burning. That night I couldn't sleep. I'd lay awake replaying the scene over and over, asking myself why such a small touch could make me feel so restless. She was my employer, a woman untouchable, too powerful, too far above me. And yet, every time I saw her, I felt something deep and dangerous stirring inside me. The tension only grew in the weeks that followed. She would call me into her study late at night to bring her tea or wine. I'd stand by the door while she read documents or spoke into her phone in hushed tones. Sometimes she ignored me entirely, other times she looked at me so intently I had to avert my gaze. One evening, I entered her study with a glass of wine. She was sitting by the fireplace, her blouse undone just enough to reveal the curve of her chest, her legs crossed, her expression unreadable. "Do you ever wonder what it's like to live differently, Elena?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer than usual. I nearly dropped the glass. "Differently?" I repeated, unsure what she meant. To live without limits. To break rules instead of following them. To take what you want, no matter the consequences. Her eyes fixed on mine, unblinking. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering in my chest. I don't know if I've ever had that choice." "Maybe you should," she said, her lips curving into the ghost of a smile. The moment felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind pushing at my back. I placed the glass of wine on the table, my hands trembling slightly, and turned to leave. But before I could, she said my name again, softly, almost tenderly. "Elena." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. "Don't be afraid of what you feel." Her words followed me out of the study and into the long, quiet halls of the mansion. They echoed in my head as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Don't be afraid of what you feel, but what exactly did I feel? Desire, yes, but also fear. Fear of crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Fear of losing myself in her world. A world that was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. The next morning, as I set out fresh flowers in the dining room, I caught her watching me from the doorway. Her gaze was steady, her expression unreadable, but something in her eyes told me she knew. She knew the battle waging inside me, the pull I couldn't resist. I lowered my eyes quickly, pretending to fuss with the vase. But even as I arranged the flowers, my mind raced. How much longer could I pretend? How much longer before the whispers of passion became impossible to silence? I didn't know then that my choice was coming faster than I thought. And when it came, nothing in my life would ever be the same. The next few days were unbearable. Every time I entered a room, I felt her eyes on me. It wasn't constant, but enough for me to notice. I'd be dusting a shelf or adjusting curtains, and I'd catch her leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with that unreadable look. It wasn't the gaze of an employer checking up on her staff. It was heavier, slower, lingering in a way that made my skin prickle with awareness. I tried to bury myself in work, convincing myself I was imagining things. After all, why would a woman like Victoria, wealthy, powerful, magnetic, ever see me as anything other than her maid? And yet, when our eyes met, I couldn't ignore the subtle shift in the air, like static before a storm. One evening I was assigned to prepare the dining room for a small gathering. The table gleamed with polished silver, and candles flickered in the crystal holders. Victoria entered just as I was placing the final glass. She wore a black satin dress that hugged her body in ways that left no room for indifference. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders, and her perfume, something expensive and intoxicating, drifted across the room. "You did well," she said, her voice low. "Thank you, ma'am," I replied, keeping my eyes on the table. "Don't call me that," she corrected gently. I froze, the words settling between us like a secret. She walked closer, the click of her heels echoing against the marble floor. "My name is Victoria. Use it." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, Victoria." The sound of her name leaving my lips felt dangerous, like stepping into forbidden territory. She smiled faintly, as if satisfied, then brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine. That small touch was enough to make me tremble. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had grown quiet, I lingered in the kitchen, washing the last of the glasses. The air was thick with silence when I sensed someone behind me. I turned, and there she was, Victoria, standing only a few feet away. "Why are you still working so late?" she asked softly. "I wanted to finish," I said, drying my hands nervously. Her gaze lingered on me, moving slowly from my face to my hands, and then back again. "You work too hard. Sometimes it's not about duty, Elena. Sometimes it's about desire." The way she said the word desire made my knees weaken. She stepped closer, so close that I could smell her perfume again. My heart pounded wildly, and I felt caught, like prey, but prey that wanted to be caught. "Victoria," I breathed, not even sure what I meant to say. She tilted her head, studying me as though I were a puzzle she intended to solve. Her hand reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. It was barely a touch, but it sent a shiver through me, so strong I had to grip the counter for balance. You feel it too, she said, almost to herself. I opened my mouth to deny it, to say something safe, but the truth spilled out instead. Yes, the word hung in the air, raw and terrifying. She closed the space between us, her lips inches from mine. I thought she was going to kiss me right then, but instead she stopped, her eyes locked on mine. Not yet, she whispered. When you're ready. And then she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me breathless and shaking. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what had just happened. She wanted me, but she was waiting for me to take the step. The realization both thrilled and terrified me. I wanted her too, more than I'd ever wanted anything, but what would it mean? What would it cost me to cross that line? The following days were charged with an energy I couldn't escape. Every look, every touch, every accidental brush of her hand against mine felt deliberate, electric, and yet neither of us made the first move. The tension grew unbearable, like a rope pulled so tight it could snap at any moment. Then one stormy evening, everything shifted. Thunder rolled across the sky as I moved through the darkened halls, checking windows to make sure they were closed. The power flickered once, twice, before the mansion fell into near darkness, lit only by the glow of candles. I headed toward the study to see if Victoria needed anything, my heart pounding from the storm and from the thought of seeing her. She was there, standing by the window, her silhouette framed by flashes of lightning. She turned as I entered, her eyes catching the light like fire. "Storms make the world honest," she said, her voice steady despite the thunder. "They strip everything away until only the truth remains." I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. "Tell me the truth, Eleanor," she continued, stepping closer. "Do you want this? Do you want me?" The words cut through me like lightning itself. My breath caught, my chest tightening with the weight of it. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then with every ounce of courage I had, I said it. Yes. The storm crashed outside as the word left my lips, as though the sky itself was bearing witness to my confession. Victoria's eyes darkened, and she smiled slowly, dangerously. "Good. Then everything changes now." She reached out, her fingers trailing down my arm, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. I let her touch linger, my body trembling under her gaze. But just as she leaned in, just as her lips brushed against mine in the faintest ghost of a kiss, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. She pulled back instantly, her expression sharp, and whispered, "Not here. Not now." And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the storm-lit study, my lips tingling, my body shaking, my heart aching with both longing and fear. The truth was out now. There was no turning back. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered inside me. For days after that night in the study, I carried the weight of her near kiss, of her question, and of my answer. I had admitted it, I wanted her, and yet nothing had happened. Life in the mansion went on as if it hadn't shifted completely, as if I wasn't walking through each hallway, replaying that moment over and over again. Victoria was quieter in those days, though not distant. She didn't avoid me. In fact, she still found reasons to linger in the same room, to let her hand brush against mine when passing me something, to meet my eyes for just a little too long. But the intensity was muted, as if she were deliberately pulling back. I couldn't decide if she was protecting me, herself, or both of us. One afternoon, I was arranging flowers in the sunroom. The glass walls flooded the space with light, catching every particle of dust in the air. I could almost convince myself I was calm. But then her voice broke through the silence. "You chose yellow roses," she said from behind me. I turned, startled. Yes, they were the freshest at the market. Her eyes softened as she stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the bouquet, then back to me. "Do you know what they symbolize?" I shook my head. "Friendship," she said, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "But also jealousy." The word landed heavy between us, stirring something I wasn't ready to confront. She held my gaze, and in that moment I felt like she was daring me to ask if she was jealous. Jealous of who? Jealous of what? But I didn't. Instead, I busied myself with trimming stems that didn't need trimming, my hands trembling. Victoria. I began, but my voice caught. Yes? She asked softly, leaning against the glass wall. Sunlight glinting off her dark hair. I don't understand what we're doing, I admitted, my voice barely steady. Her smile faded, replaced with something heavier, more vulnerable. Neither do I, the admission startled me. She had always seemed so sure, so in control. Hearing uncertainty in her voice made her suddenly more human, more reachable. And yet, before I could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hall. One of the other staff members appeared, needing her attention, and the moment shattered like glass. I carried that conversation with me the rest of the day, restless and distracted. It was clear she was holding something back, but what? Was it fear of scandal, of being discovered? Or was it something deeper, fear of intimacy itself? That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, until I finally decided to walk through the quiet mansion, letting the silence soothe me. As I passed the library, I noticed the door slightly ajar and a warm glow spilling out. Curiosity tugged at me. I pushed the door open gently. Victoria sat by the fire, a glass of red wine in her hand. She wasn't dressed in her usual elegance. Instead, she wore a simple silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked less like a millionaire, untouchable woman, and more like someone weary. Someone searching. You're awake, she said. Not surprised to see me. So are you, I replied. Stepping inside, she gestured to the chair across from her. Sit, I obeyed, though my heart thudded in my chest. The warmth of the fire only added to the heat I felt. She sipped her wine slowly, then set the glass down, her eyes fixed on me. Do you know why I stopped in the study that night? She asked suddenly. I swallowed. Because of the footsteps? She shook her head. No, because I wasn't sure if I could stop if I kissed you. Her honesty struck me like lightning. My breath caught, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. I didn't know what to say. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low, intimate. You don't know how dangerous this could be, Eleanor, for both of us. You think it's just attraction, but it's more. And once we cross that line, there's no pretending anymore. Her words both thrilled and terrified me. Maybe I don't want to pretend, I said, surprising even myself. She exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. You don't know what you're saying. Then show me, I challenged, my voice trembling but resolute. The silence that followed was unbearable. She stood slowly, crossing the room until she stood directly in front of me. She reached down, her fingers brushing against my cheek, tilting my face up to hers. The firelight flickered in her eyes, but before her lips could reach mine, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. We both froze. What was that? I whispered, heart racing. She pulled away reluctantly, her face tense. Stay here, she instructed, moving toward the door. I followed anyway, unwilling to be left behind. Together, we stepped into the corridor, where we found one of the maids hurriedly cleaning up a shattered vase. She looked terrified, stammering apologies. Victoria dismissed her gently but firmly, assuring her it was fine. When the hall quieted again, Victoria turned back to me. The moment in the library was broken, the fire between us forced into silence once more. She studied me for a long time, before finally saying, You see, Elena, the world is always watching. It will always find a way to remind us that we are not alone. Her words stung. Not because they weren't true, but because they meant she was still holding back. I wanted to scream, to demand clarity, to make her admit what I knew she felt. But instead, I followed her back into the library, where the fire burned lower, and we sat in heavy silence until she finally dismissed me to bed. That night, lying awake, I realized something. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was a battle. A tug-of-war between desire and fear, between secrecy and honesty. And I didn't know how much longer I could stand in the middle without breaking. The next morning, everything appeared normal again, as though nothing had happened. But inside me, everything had changed. I knew what I wanted. The question was, would she ever allow herself to give it to me? The days that followed blurred together like pages, turning too quickly in a book. I couldn't pause. Outwardly, everything returned to routine. I polished silverware, arranged flowers, and ensured that the grand mansion radiated perfection. But inside, the tension between Victoria and me simmered like water just below boiling. Every glance carried weight, every word was heavy with what wasn't said. It was a Thursday morning when the external world finally intruded on the fragile cocoon we'd built. A group of guests arrived unexpectedly. Business partners of Victoria's, men and women dressed in immaculate suits, their laughter echoing through the marble halls. They filled the mansion with energy that clashed against the quiet rhythm I had grown used to. I tried to stay invisible as I moved through the rooms, serving drinks and arranging trays of hors d'oeuvres. But invisibility was impossible when Victoria's eyes sought me out even in crowded spaces. She never lingered too long, but I felt her presence, her gaze sliding over me in moments no one else seemed to notice. One of the guests, however, did notice. A man named Charles, older with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from wealth, cornered me in the dining room while I replenished glasses of champagne. "You've been here long?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "Just a few months," I replied, keeping my answers polite and clipped. He smirked. "You seem close to Victoria." The words made my stomach tighten. "She's my employer." "Of course," he said with a knowing look, as though the idea amused him. "But she's not easy to get close to. Not unless she wants you there." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. Before I could respond, Victoria appeared in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence was commanding enough to silence him instantly. "Charles," she said smoothly, "don't harass my staff. Just making conversation," he replied, raising his hands in mock surrender. But his eyes darted between the two of us with a flicker of suspicion. That night, after the guests had retired to their rooms, I lingered in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning. My hands shook slightly, replaying Charles's words. "Close to Victoria." He had seen it, sensed it. And if he had, others might too. "Why are you still awake?" Her voice made me jump. I turned to find Victoria leaning against the doorway, her arms crossed, her silk blouse glowing faintly under the dim kitchen light. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The room suddenly felt too small, the silence too loud. "You need to be careful," she said finally. "Careful?" I echoed, confused. "People notice things," she said softly, her gaze locked on mine. "Men like Charles, they feed on whispers, on rumors. One slip, one glance too long, and they'll destroy you just to get to me." Her words stung, not because they weren't true, but because of the implication behind them. "Destroy me or destroy us?" I asked quietly. Her breath hitched, and for once, she didn't have an immediate response. She moved closer, her voice low. "Both." For a moment, the distance between us was nothing. I could feel the heat of her body, smell the faint trace of her perfume. I wanted to close the gap, to demand more than these half-confessions, but then a sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. We both froze. "Victoria." It was Charles's voice, muffled but clear. "Could I have a word?" Victoria straightened instantly, her entire demeanor shifting into the controlled elegance she wore, like armor. She glanced at me, her eyes urging silence, then opened the door just enough to step out. I was left in the kitchen, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. Through the thin door, I could make out fragments of their conversation. Charles's voice was low, but his words were edged with venom. "You've always been careful, Victoria. Don't let one slip of the heart ruin your reputation." Her reply was too quiet for me to hear, but the tension in the air was suffocating. When she finally returned, her expression was tight, her jaw clenched. "What did he say?" I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing important, but I knew it wasn't nothing." The shadow in her eyes told me otherwise. Later that night, as I lay in my bed, I thought about what it meant to be entangled in her world. It wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about danger, about the way the walls seemed to close in the more we tried to hide. The following morning, Victoria acted as though nothing had happened, greeting the guests with her poised smile and effortless charm. But when her eyes met mine across the breakfast table, I saw the storm still churning beneath the surface. After the guests departed, the mansion felt hollow, as though it had absorbed all the tension and was still buzzing with it. I found Victoria in her study, staring out the window at the sprawling gardens. "He knows," I said quietly. She didn't turn around. "Yes, then what do we do?" She finally faced me, her expression torn between defiance and despair. "We decide if this is worth the cost." Her words sliced through me. Worth the cost? Was she asking me or herself? I stepped closer, my heart racing. "Victoria, it already costs me every day. Every time I look at you and can't touch you. Every time I hear your voice and can't tell you how I feel. The question isn't if it's worth the cost. It's if you're brave enough to pay it." Her eyes widened slightly, as though I'd surprised her. She opened her mouth to respond, but then stopped, her gaze dropping to the floor. The silence between us stretched, heavy and charged. Then in a voice barely above a low tone, she said, "If I give in, Elena, there's no going back." Everything changes. I felt the truth of her words. The line we were towing wasn't just about attraction. It was about rewriting our lives, about facing scrutiny, judgment, and perhaps betrayal. But my answer came without hesitation. "Then let it change." She exhaled, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the desk. For the first time, I saw fear in her, not of me, but of herself, of what she might lose if she chose this path. Before she could answer, the phone on her desk rang loudly, shattering the fragile moment. She stared at it, then at me, torn between worlds. I stood frozen, knowing that whatever she decided to say next would either pull us together or tear us apart. The sound of that phone ringing still echoes in my head when I think about that day. It wasn't just a call. It felt like fate itself interrupting us, demanding to know whether we were ready to confront what was building between us. Victoria answered it with her usual grace, her tone steady and professional, while I stood frozen across the study, my heart hammering so loud I was certain she could hear it between her words. When she finally hung up, she didn't look at me right away. Instead, she rested her hand on the receiver a little longer, as if steadying herself. "That was the board," she said softly. "There's an emergency meeting tomorrow. They've heard rumors." The word rumors sent a chill racing through me. "About us?" She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine as though I already held the answer. "About me. But Charles, he's clever. He knows how to bend truth into suspicion. And yes, I suspect it involves you too." My throat tightened. This wasn't just our secret anymore. It was ammunition in someone else's hands. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling despite how hard I tried to keep it calm. Victoria crossed the room slowly, every movement deliberate, like a queen descending from her throne. When she stood close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her hands, she said, "We stay careful, and we decide if this is a battle we're both willing to fight." I wanted to tell her I was ready, that I would endure whispers, stares, anything, if it meant not hiding what we had. But her eyes told me how much she stood to lose. Wealth, power, respect, entire empires could crumble around her if she gave them the wrong reason. That night I couldn't sleep again. I tossed and turned, replaying every word, every look, every warning. Finally, I slipped out of bed and padded down the hall. I found her in the library, alone, staring at a half-finished glass of wine. "You can't carry this alone," I said softly from the doorway. She turned, startled, but didn't tell me to leave. Instead, she gestured for me to sit. I did, curling into the armchair across from hers. The silence between us was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with everything we hadn't said. "Do you know what they'll do if they believe the rumors?" she asked finally. I shook my head. "They'll strip me of influence. They'll brand me as reckless, incapable of separating business from personal. They'll look at me like I've lost control." Her voice cracked slightly, though she tried to hide it. "And maybe they'll be right. Because when I'm around you, Elena, I don't think like I used to." Her vulnerability sent a sharp ache through me. "Victoria, you're not losing control. You're letting yourself feel. There's nothing weak about that." Her laugh was bitter. "Try telling that to the world I live in." The words hung between us like a curse. I leaned forward, unable to stay distant. So what are you saying? That we stop this before it ruins you? Her eyes snapped to mine, burning with something fierce. Do you want me to stop? The question stunned me. I searched her face, trying to read whether it was a plea or a challenge. My pulse thundered in my ears. No, I whispered, almost defiant. I don't want you to stop. The air between us shifted, heavy with the weight of truth we could no longer bury. She stood and closed the space between us. Her hand brushed against mine, tentative at first, then firmer, as though daring herself to cross the final line. And then she kissed me. It wasn't the stolen, fleeting touches of before. This kiss was deliberate, full of everything we had both been holding back. Her lips tasted of wine and desperation, her body trembling against mine, as though she'd been fighting this battle far longer than I had known. When we pulled apart, breathless, she pressed her forehead against mine. You realize, she said softly, that everything changes now. I nodded. I wanted to. But just as quickly as the warmth flooded through me, the reality returned. The board meeting, the rumors, the world outside these walls that wouldn't understand what this moment meant. The next day arrived far too quickly. I stood at the edge of the grand foyer, watching Victoria prepare to leave for her meeting. She was immaculate as always, her black suit sharp, her hair swept back in a way that made her look untouchable. But when her eyes found mine, I saw the flicker of fear she couldn't hide. You don't have to face this alone, I told her. Her hand brushed my arm as she passed, lingering just a moment longer than it should have. I already am, she replied softly. Those words stung, but I understood. To the outside world, I couldn't exist by her side, not yet. Hours passed like days. I paced the halls, imagining every scenario, every possible outcome. Would she return triumphant or broken? Would she deny me to protect herself? Or worse, would she be forced to? Finally, the sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Victoria walked in, her face unreadable. For a terrifying moment I thought she would pass me by without a word. But then she stopped, turned, and looked at me with eyes brimming with something raw. They gave me a choice, she said, her voice low. Distance myself from you, or face consequences that could ruin me. My heart clenched. And what did you choose? She stepped closer, her breath shaky, her hand reaching for mine. I chose you. The words hit me like fire. Relief, joy, and fear all tangled inside me. I wanted to cry, to laugh, to collapse into her arms. But I also knew what her choice meant, that the storm ahead was real, and we would face it together. I touched her cheek gently, grounding myself in the moment. Then we'll fight it, I said. Together. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, one that held both sorrow and hope. Together. But even as we stood there, united in our decision, I couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning. That the hardest battles still lay ahead, waiting just beyond the safety of these walls. And in that fragile silence, I realized the truth. Love could save us, or it could destroy us. The only certainty was that we'd chosen it anyway. The morning after the board meeting felt like stepping into a new reality. Victoria and I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had chosen me, but in doing so she had challenged the world she had spent her entire life controlling. I woke early, the weight of her words still heavy in my chest. I chose you. For a long time, I simply lay there, staring at the high ceiling of her room, wondering what those words would mean tomorrow. Next week, or years from now, when I finally found her. She was standing by the tall windows in her study, her arms folded across her chest, staring out at the gardens like they might give her an answer she couldn't find herself. The morning light caught her profile, highlighting the strength etched into her features. But I could see it, beneath all the elegance. She was afraid. Victoria, I said quietly. She turned, her expression softening the second her eyes met mine. Elena, she replied, her voice low, like saying my name was the only thing tethering her. I crossed the room slowly, deliberately, my steps echoing against the polished floor. When I reached her, I touched her hand. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away, but instead laced her fingers through mine, squeezing as though reminding herself I was real. "What happens now?" I asked. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Now? Now we live with the consequences." The words sent a shiver through me. "Are you sure? You know they won't make this easy for you. Or for us." She turned back toward the window, her reflection in the glass showing a flicker of doubt. "No, they won't. Charles will come after me harder than ever. The board will look for cracks in my armor. And society," she paused, sighing, "society will never forgive me for loving someone I wasn't supposed to." Her honesty cut deep, but it also gave me strength. I stepped closer, pressing my forehead against her shoulder. "Let them come," I said firmly. "I don't care about them." "I care about you." Victoria turned, cupping my face with both hands, her eyes brimming with emotion I rarely saw from her. "Do you understand what you've done to me?" she asked, her tone trembling between accusation and wonder. "You've taken this woman who built walls so high no one could reach her, and now you've made me want to tear them down." Her vulnerability unraveled me. I leaned into her touch, my voice breaking, then let them fall. We stayed there, tangled in silence, both knowing the world outside wouldn't pause for our fragile moment. Later that day, Victoria insisted on taking a drive. "I need air," she said, "and I need to see the world outside this house before it consumes me." The car was sleek, powerful like everything about her. I sat beside her, watching the way the wind teased loose strands of her hair as the city passed us by. But everywhere we went I felt eyes on us. People noticing. People guessing. The rumors weren't whispers anymore. They were taking shape, becoming louder, heavier. We stopped at a quiet cafe tucked into a side street, one of those places that didn't care who you were. She ordered coffee, and I watched her hands wrap around the porcelain cup, steady but tense. "Elena," she said suddenly, her eyes on me, "if I lose everything, will you stay?" The question pierced me. She wasn't asking it as the powerful woman who commanded boardrooms, but as someone stripped of certainty, stripped of armor. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Even if the world turns its back on you, I won't." Her shoulders loosened just slightly. "Then maybe that's enough." But as we left the cafe, the world reminded us that it was watching. A photographer stood across the street, camera raised. The click of the shutter cut through the air like a gunshot. Victoria froze. For a moment, fear and fury collided in her eyes. Then she tightened her grip on my hand and pulled me forward past the stairs, past the whispers, past the lens that would soon turn our truth into headlines. That night, back in her home, she poured herself another glass of wine, but didn't drink it. Instead, she set it aside and looked at me with the kind of clarity I hadn't seen before. "They'll know by tomorrow," she said. "The photos will spread. The stories will spin. But let them, because hiding us, has already been destroying me." Tears filled my eyes. But they weren't just from fear. They were from the raw relief of hearing her finally say it out loud. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her, holding her as though the rest of the world didn't matter. "We'll face it together," I whispered against her neck, her arms tightened around me, her voice breaking in my ear. Together, and in that moment I knew the storm was coming. But I also knew that whatever battles lay ahead, whatever headlines screamed our names, whatever society decided to say about us, our love had already survived the hardest war, the war against ourselves. I pulled back, just enough to look into her eyes. "Victoria, I've learned something through all of this." "What's that?" "That love isn't about safety. It isn't about control. It's about courage, the courage to stand in the fire, knowing it could burn you and still refusing to run." Her lips trembled, then curved into a faint smile. "Then let's burn, Elena." And so we stood there in the quiet of her home, knowing the world outside was ready to consume us, but holding on to the only truth that mattered: our love. A love that, no matter how forbidden, had given us both the courage to face the unknown. Love asks us all the same question. Are you brave enough to fight for it, even when the world tells you not to? Think about the moments you've hidden, the truths you've silenced, the desires you've pushed aside. What would change if you chose courage over fear? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More stories of love, risk, and resilience await.